Good morning. Today is Sunday, May 31st, 2026. My name is Terry Morgan. We're here to talk about traditional martial arts philosophy, philosophy in general, and in particular, the idea of Shin, the idea of heart. Is translates as heart mind. It sometimes is also translated as mind. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that concept, that idea this morning. As we get started, one of the things that I've been paying attention to, working on, all sorts of stuff, right, is the idea of connections. This is something that is part of all of our practice in Chinese martial arts. It's fundamental for connecting. I'm checking the stream over here. Sorry. It's fundamental for connecting inside and outside. All of the inner and outer connections matter. What we keep through those inner and outer connections. So inside we have the inner breath, the chi, is connected to the mind. Yi is connected to the heart. Shin is connected to the energy. Jing is connected to the spirit. Shen. All of those are things that I talk about in class and that I'm going to explore a little bit more through the philosophical basis for these ideas, with this idea of everything being connected, right? I was this morning literally outside looking at the trees in the garden. I planted most of them. It's been 20 years this year. They've grown well. There are some that I planted that didn't grow at all. There are some that I planted that, yeah, they grew sort of and then they didn't. And there's a couple that grew really quite well. That connection through time, through the development that quite literally those trees went through. The yard, what it looked like when I moved in, what it looked like 5 years ago, what it looked like 10 years ago, what it looked like 15 years ago, what it looked like today. All of those changes, all of those connections are part of the growth that the garden, the yard, trees, the rest of the shrubs, the plants, flowers, everything went through. A lot of birds in the trees now. There's a nice canopy. The squirrels don't have to necessarily come down to the ground to get around the yard. They're quite happy with that. That transformation, because it is. When I moved in, there weren't any trees, not really. One or two, and they were pretty scrawny. That transformation is something that we look for in practice as well. The trees in the garden are a metaphor for all sorts of things. In developing our skills, in developing our root, in understanding how we develop, how things grow, how we can build on the skills that we have to develop more. That idea that I have some trees, well, that enables. If I didn't have the trees, I wouldn't have the birds that are nesting in the trees. Wouldn't be possible. That idea is what we want to bring to practice. I talked about this in Qigong class this week, the idea that the student comes to learn without knowing where they're going or what they're going to do. They're curious and they need a teacher, somebody who knows more, who can lead them to somewhere else. It's the teacher's job to do that leading. How do we establish the foundation? How do we create that foundation for the student? How do we create our own foundations? Part of that comes through our own study and practice, obviously, and it comes through what we have been taught and what we have learned. Now, in my own practice and teaching, I spend a lot of time with I spend a lot of time with definitions. Spend a lot of time with development too, but the word I was going for was definitions. What is this? What are we talking about? What does that mean? Is that the correct word for whatever it is? I've struggled with that as a translator, as an interpreter. I've struggled with that as a student, trying to figure out what this or that book was talking about, what this or that author was talking about. And one of the things that I learned, and that's part of what we're talking about this morning, is that the definition of this word or that word can vary. Part of that comes from culture. Part of that comes from that struggle of trying to find which is the right word. In this culture, what does that word mean? In that culture, what's the relevant word? How do I match these up? How do I say, well, this means this and that means that, but this has this connotation, that has that meaning, and oh no, I don't know how to do this. It can be very difficult, particularly for fundamental concepts, because fundamental concepts give us the rest of whatever it is we're doing. Chi. What is chi? I translate it as internal breath. Breath. It can also be translated in context as air. It's been translated as energy. It's not quite right, but it is an approximation, a reasonable approximation in English of what the concept of chi represents. It is that perspective that comes from having looked at multiple definitions for the same word, looking at what other writers have said about this particular term, that particular term, because many of these terms that we're talking about, in fact, go back thousands of years. It's not just, we invented this last week. It really is a long, long history. And there have been many, many writers, many scholars who have spent their entire lives studying and working, paying attention to this one or two concepts, trying to figure out what do we really mean by this? What do we really mean by that? What is shin? What is heart? What is shin if we interpret it as mind? That heart-mind, the combination of thought and feeling that work together, connected, that idea of connections with the large live oak trees in the garden. I have birds who eat the little berries and build their nests up in the tall branches. I have smaller plants and ground cover that are great for rabbits and smaller animals. There are berries on the mulberry tree. The squirrels and the birds like those. That connection, that ecosystem. There's food, there's animals that eat it, there's more. That collective that's more than just one. Before I had the trees, I didn't have the birds that live in the trees. I had some scrub trees and there's some birds that live next door, but I didn't have the birds in my yard. I needed the trees. In developing our mind, developing our practice, developing how we approach what we're doing, and in fact, what it is we're actually doing in practice. We need to pay attention to some of these fundamental definitions, and we need to pay attention to how they're connected to our practice. In paying attention to the heart, what I keep in my heart, and this is a common definition, the idea that I have an open heart, that I have an open mind, that I'm willing to allow other things to come in, that I have on the opposite tier, that I have a hard heart, that I'm not willing to, I'm very judgmental. I'm not accepting of anything or anyone outside my own paradigm, my own view of the world. This is my view, and nobody can have a different view than mine. Oh, well, that is a problem for learning. That is a problem for developing our skills, because many of the concepts, many of the things that we will meet in traditional Chinese martial arts are not part of ordinary culture. They're not part of day-to-day living unless you practice. They're not going to be part of business negotiation necessarily, although they might. It really depends on who's in that negotiation. In studying these connections, in studying what is the heart, we come to terms with the idea that we have to consider perspective. We have to consider how we look at the concept. What does it mean? What's a definition for this idea of heart mind? In emptying the heart, emptying the mind, the idea is not to become thoughtless, although that is a word that's used. The idea is to become more open so that any one thought does not dominate, that there is an emptiness and a thoughtlessness that's more about being open than it is about being I'm going to use the word empty again, because that is the right word. So I'm going to do something, and I'm going to talk about it for a second. First, I'm going to use my facial expression to express thoughtlessness, that I don't care about anything, that I'm completely thoughtless, that there's an emptiness and a void about me. If you look at my face through those few seconds, it will seem dull. That was my goal. My eyes are lifeless. It's empty. Being able to do that, empty the mind, empty the heart, empty the spirit, let go of all appearances, is a skill that we want, but it's not enough by itself. The kind of emptiness we want, subtle differences do make a difference. The kind of emptiness we want is open, receptive, alert, able to differentiate as we choose, and not confined to appearances, not bound to appearances. There is a depth of interest, and there's a sense of energy, spirit, thoughtfulness without being tied to a particular thought, a level of energy without being excessive, overly abundant. It simply is. That kind of energy, that kind of openness, that kind of thoughtfulness is part of what we want to work toward. It's part of what we want to achieve. It's not everything, but it's a big part. It's a big step. Getting there takes practice. It does. I need coffee. It takes a level of understanding that we can do this, that it's, excuse me, it's something we can achieve. It's part of that idea that I was talking about, where the student has to want to learn, the teacher has to want to teach, and the teacher has to be able to teach. The idea that, particularly on Qigong practice, that we do a couple of movements and we breathe in and out. We do that. That is true. But that's not all there is. And that notion that there are more layers, there are more things to pay attention to, and there are more connections to work on, is something that we need to develop. It's something that It doesn't come through recognition, it comes through development. That, and I stress this frequently, I know this one thing. Okay, good. That's great. It's no problem. That's a good thing. You know that. Do it. Do what? You just told me that you understand the concept of emptiness. Show me some level that you understand and then explain it to me. No? Being able to understand something is first step. The second step is practice and learning what it means. And as we go through that process of learning, we develop the understanding that we wanted to have at the very beginning. It has to be developed. It's not an instant, now I can. In study, we have to go through that same type of learning. We have to go through that same kind of process where we have encountered something that we don't know. What is this? What is this? I'm used Qigong. What is this Qigong stuff? What's it mean? What am I supposed to be doing? Gradually, we develop skills. As we develop those skills, we develop greater ability. As we develop greater ability, we develop the ability to learn more. As we develop the ability to learn more, we gain understanding. And we go back and do it again. In the studies, my own studies, this idea of becoming empty, of letting go of all of the thoughts, of all of the noise, of being able to listen to whatever is around me without focusing on any one particular thing, being open and cultivating that inner stillness. I looked at a lot of books, I read a lot, and happened on this particular book. It's called Cultivating Stillness. It's a translation by Eva Wong, and it has a number of passages that are absolutely relevant to what we're doing, what I'm talking about in this class, and the idea of quieting the mind, quieting the heart. In this book, the character Shin is frequently translated, and I'm going to show you this character right here. This is the character, and I'll put it up in the text. And that is a diagram from this book, by the way. All right. It's a chapter called The Nature of Emotion, Shin. And it talks about, particularly in the commentary, it talks about this idea of letting go of want, something that is particular to the Buddhist canon. It talks about letting go of appearances, something that is part of the Taoist canon. Those who are unable to attain the Tao are those whose minds are not clear and who are still slaves of their emotions. In the commentary, those who are unable to attain the Tao are people whose minds are not clear. Those who are slaves of their emotions are people who are not free of the 7 emotions and the 6 cravings. Mortals are unable to become immortals, Buddhas, or sages because they cannot lay aside happiness, anger, sadness, delight. Be free of the emotion happiness, and it will be transformed into original nature. Be free of the emotion anger, and it will be transformed into original feeling. Be free of the emotion sadness, and it will be transformed into original spirit. Be free of the emotion delight, and it will be transformed into original generative force. Be free of want, and it will be transformed into the original breath. In this way, the 5 cravings will be transformed into the 5 original essences. When that happens, you will become immortal. The Confucian sages say, "See not that which you abstain from. Hear not that which stirs up your fears." The Buddhists teach that there should be no thoughts in the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body. No color, no sound, no fragrance, no taste, and no touch. The Taoists say that forms are elusive. The 3 religions teach the same principles. Act according to the 3 teachings, and you will be free of craving. This is philosophy class. It is. The ideas, see not that which you abstain from. If I don't want to look at something, I should not go looking for it. There are things that I particularly don't like. Why would I go look for them? I don't want to. I don't want to. Thanks. No. Hear not that which stirs up your fears. Something that causes me distress is not something I want to listen to. And I can think of all kinds of sounds and things that I don't want to hear, that are part of the human condition, that cause me great distress. And when I listen to them, why do I want to cause myself distress? That may exist, and it may be something that is tragic and traumatic and terrible. And if I spend my time, if I spend my energy looking at those things, all it will do is cause me distress. Don't look. This is not a turn away from and disregard kind of an idea. This is protect yourself. See not that which you abstain from. I don't want to see this. I'm not going to go look. In the Buddhist idea, don't give in to the senses. What the eyes perceive can be deceptive. How many times have you seen someone in disguise? How many times have you seen a movie or a TV show that showed you something that was absolutely not real? And particularly in today, with all of the AI generated material. It's not real. It's not. You can see it, and if it's got sound, you can hear it. It's not real. How do we distinguish? How do we distinguish? This is part of what I'm talking about with this concept of heart, the idea of heart mind, of letting go of appearances. I can see something that was AI generated, and most of the time, it takes a lot to confuse me anymore, but most of the time I can see that it's AI generated and it's not real. It's not real. I can look at a movie with human actors at a physical location going through some real activity, because to put it on film, it's real. They have to do something, right? And I can know that what I'm looking at is a movie. It was created by someone and put together and produced, and they have actors who are portraying characters. The reality TV isn't real either. And we all know that. Or we should. It's not. Sitting in a old-fashioned diner, truck stop restaurant, sidewalk cafe, a deli, that is real. And that will give a real idea of real world perspective. It's also still, excuse me, it's also still part of the illusion. That illusion that we see that's out there. And the illusion that we keep in our heart to perceive what's out there. What do we see? Pick any of those places. It doesn't matter. You can sit in a park and sit on a bus stop. Anywhere that there are people who will pass by. Not in cars, not in trains. Train stations are good though. And pay attention to what you see. What do you see? What's really there? And how do you look at what you see? I was on a train in Italy. Wasn't crowded. Wasn't crowded at all. And we came to a stop at a small town, just a single platform. There was an old man standing on the platform. He looked a little lost. He wasn't sure what he was doing there. It seemed odd. And the train stopped, and there was a family that got off, a man and a woman and two children. And as they got off the train, and I get a little, I'm talking about this in a second. As they got off the train, the old man looked up and smiled. One of those two adults was very likely his son or daughter. The joy in his face, I remember to this day. And that's, yeah, that emotion, I use them. I use them. And I've gotten comfortable with the idea that I have them. I've gotten very comfortable with that. The first impression that I had of that old man was that he was lonely and he was very sad. And when that emotion changed, it was visible. I was sitting on the train. I was well away. They were 2 cars away. He was way up on the platform, far away from me. I could still see it. I could feel it. That ability to see what's there. I didn't see a bent old man. That's what I saw at first, the outward appearance. And then I saw the sadness in his body. And when that family got off the train, his body straightened. That visible change is part of what we want to pay attention to, what we want to look for as we cultivate the connections inside and as we develop the ability to empty the mind and empty the heart. I wasn't thinking about myself. I was just, what do I see? What's here? I opened my mind to what was possible. And what I saw is what I saw. I didn't try to impose myself on it. I was sitting in a train car, 2 cars back, and they couldn't even see me unless they wanted to look at the train. I wasn't a participant. I was an observer. Being able to observe is one of the skills that we want to develop. It's absolutely one of the skills we want to develop. Being able to see what my opponent intends to do before my opponent knows what they intend to do, that's a good skill to have. It's a very good skill to have. We develop that skill through becoming empty, that not dull and lifeless empty, but open empty. And as we cultivate that stillness, as we develop the ability to become empty, we develop the ability to see beyond appearances, to see beyond the form, to look for what it is that animates the form, and to develop those connections so that as we develop each of the ideas, components, skills, abilities, whatever you want to call, Qi, Jing, Shen, Yi, Shen, that we learn what we can do with them and how to develop them further. I'm going to stop here for this class. I will be back next week, Thursday and Friday, with study and teaching for Qigong, the third set, Wild Goose Flying. And I'll be back next week with more discussion of heart and how we cultivate the stillness and quiet that we want to develop so that we can begin to use and further develop all of the other aspects of our being. Thank you.